The meeting this evening is the first of two meetings. The second meeting, which will occur next Sunday afternoon, is not a repeat of this meeting, but is a follow-up of the information which is going to be presented here. The meeting tonight will consist of Olympic oil. Following that, which should end at approximately 8 o'clock, there will be a question period in which we will receive questions from the floor. We are going to ask you any question that you want pertinent to the general subject of the evening. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Mr. Robert Green, who is a Vice President of Pervin and Goertz, an engineering firm which has been responsible for making the plans for the Olympic Oil Company. Mr. Goertz will be in charge of the presentation of Olympics information to you for about the next hour. Mr. Green.
For the Durham site was that it was close to the Isles of Shoals, near which the tanker facilities were to be built. The other primary reason is that it is a large piece of land with very few people on it, so that it was a site which could be which could be designed so as to shield the effects of the refinery from the community better than any other site that we have been able to find in southeast New Hampshire. After the land was optioned, or most of it, the public announcement was made in November 27th. After that time, we had that this water will come from the Lamprey River. Obviously, we propose to request that. However, if the authorities feel that the Lamprey River does not have enough water in it to permit us to take this much, we will use the sewage from the local communities. There is no very low flow in the Lamprey, so they will permit that. The wastewater from the refinery will be treated in very elaborate facilities so that it could be dumped into, and we have proposed a pipeline out to the, and this wastewater will be used as ballast water on the crude oil ships buried underneath the bottom of Great Bay. There are no tankers on Great Bay or in this Piscataqua River. There are no facilities on the shores of Great Bay. There will be no boats from Olympic refineries on the Great Bay. I trust you also notice that the facilities are not, the facilities themselves are not on Great Bay, but are back from the bay 1,000 to 1,500 feet. The refinery will have the operators and staff will be trained to handle any fires that occur in the foam, which is used for fighting oil fires, entering the refinery and endangering it. May I have now the next slide, please? $400,000 barrel a day refinery in Durham, that New Hampshire, this statement has been borne out by some information from the Environmental Protective Agency in Boston, who also agree that a refinery in the area would give you a better assurance of the supply of petroleum products. As mentioned earlier, in times of shortage, allocation may prevent the refinery from supplying all of the needs. But in times of excess, which I'm sure we all hope we get to soon, well, you will certainly have an assured supply. and a refinery on the East Coast being supplied by a very large tanker has a fundamental advantage over other refineries. You simply can't get away from that. So you will be getting products at a lower price. And I'm sure that competition from the other oil companies will see to it that Mr. Onassis has to sell his at competitive prices. Now the other, it is anticipated that there would be some increase in the services which the town would be supplying, primarily to the new residents that might be moving in. But even assuming that the expenses doubled, it should save a homeowner with a $30,000 assessed valuation for taxes approximately $600. There would be lesser amounts because of the fewer facilities that are located in Portsmouth and in New Hampshire would have control over the facilities. This is, we think, an advantage rather than having the facilities somewhere else where you may feel some of the impact, certainly not as much as if it's located here, but you would not have control over it as you will here. We think these are the primary advantages, and we will be able to show you others as we proceed with our studies. We certainly don't want to kid you. There certainly are some impacts. There are going to be some negotiations on where we get all of the water. We're going to have to do something about the traffic and other problems. However, we don't think that these are insurmountable, and we think the advantages for the state and for the area certainly outweigh them.
Graduates from recognized merchant marine schools. Now to the procedure to be followed. When at sea, the master notifies his agent in New Hampshire and the operations center at the terminal about 7 to 10 days in advance of his estimated arrival time at Isle Shoal. This is done via a commercial radio station, usually Chatham. This will be updated as needed, and when it's time, but the slides have already been shown. The master will proceed to meet the pilot boat. When the pilot has boarded, a speed of 6 knots will be resumed for 6 miles to a point 6 miles from the berth where a radar beam is available, and the vessel will follow this beam on the pilot of the maneuverability of the vessel and has given order. Allen will give you section 2 of the approach procedure, and therefore I will turn the microphone over to Captain Allen. Thank you for your attention.
With the lack of a master switch on the lights, I'd like to make my short presentation and then show you 6 slides, which I'm sure that will follow the presentation and be enlightening, so if you just keep the points of interest in mind as I go along. My background is 35 years in the towing industry. I'm a licensed coastwise master, and I hold licenses as pilot for 12 ports. I spent 17 years on all types of towing assignments. I spent 11 years as a docking pilot in New York Harbor. I've been a shore.
Proper equipment design, proper personnel training, and proper operating procedures in the long run will be the cheapest and the most effective investment that can be made to guard against oil spills. First, what I'd like to do to you in these few short comments is to outline the design features of the facility which are intended to prevent oil spills.
On the left microphone, please.
Yes? Yes, I have a question for Mr. Harlow, please. My name is David Meeker. Mr. Harlow, I understand that Fred R. Harris, your company, conducted a study for Gibbs Oil 18 months ago on the feasibility of the Isle of Shoals as a tanker terminal. Further, I understand that the report concluded at that time that the Isle of Shoals was, quote, completely unacceptable, end quote, for that purpose. What has happened since that study to make you change your mind?
Thank you. I'd like to address my question to anyone. You presented your case to the New Hampshire legislature yesterday. At that time, when asked for an example of a clean refinery, you cited the Exxon refinery at Benicia, California. During the 18-month period, November 1971 to April 1973, that so-called model refinery was issued 109 violation notices. Between August 1st, 1972 and April 30th, 1973, the Benicia refinery reported 159 upset or breakdown conditions. Exxon refused to allow pollution control inspectors to enter the refinery control rooms during breakdowns. Is this the sort of model refinery that you are proposing for our area?
That is not the type of model refinery that we are proposing for this area.
Mr. Green, but that is the example that you give of a model refinery, environmentally pure, clean as a clinic?
Well, the Benicia refinery certainly isn't clean as the clinic, and I can only say that this one will be as environmentally acceptable as we possibly can make it. I don't think that we should kid each other about the fact that there are certain impacts from a refinery. I don't think we should overlook the fact that there are, during the startup periods, many upsets. I'm sorry, and I know you have the same retort to me that you haven't had a chance to read our reports, but I certainly would like to analyze, and if I can get the information from you as to all of these variances that they had, I'd like to comment on it later after I've reviewed it. I really don't know what they consist of at this time.
Thank you.
Senator, microphone, please.
Excuse me, my name is James Horrigan of Durham. The question is a general one, but I'd like to break it down in 4 points. It's this: since you propose to transform our community physically, socially, culturally, economically, in any other way you can think of, would you please tell us who you are and what you are? And to do so, could you give us the following types of information? 1, what individuals and or companies or other organizations are furnishing the financial funds for the land options in Rye, Portsmouth, and Durham?
Let me...
I'll do this quickly and then...
Well, if I could answer them one at a time, because by the time I get to the fourth, okay, I will have forgotten it.
Sure.
The funds for the options are coming from the Onassis or Nassus family. They are coming from no one else. There's no other oil company connected. There's no other individual that's supplying the money. And I assure you, Pervin and Gertz is not providing any of it.
Thank you. Number 2, where and when was Olympic Refineries incorporated, and is it indeed a subsidiary of any other?
Of the other firm. It is simply a company owned by the Onassis family or Mr. Onassis himself. I don't know the details of that.
And officers and principal stockholders of Olympic Refineries and, I suppose its parent companies are controlling companies.
I do not know that answer to that, but it is my impression that Mr. Onassis is all of those, plus any other officials that he wishes to name, such as Mr. Gratzis, who is his primary official in the U.S., and Mr. Gratzis' assistant, Mr. Papanikolaou.
Could we get a complete answer on that? Not now, but at a later time.
Joe, how many more of these you got? You're about out
I'm
of
going
time.
fast. Oh, sorry. Well,
I'm slow.
I'll get back to you later, but I'd like to give some other people a chance. You got one
oh,
more?
my cutoff?
You got one more? Please,
Yes,
I'm trying
please.
to limit both people to 2 minutes. Your questions are important, and I've tried to listen, but please, let's bring it to a close so somebody else can have a chance.
Okay. In order to judge the economic efficiency and social responsibility and the financial solvency of Olympic refineries, could we please be furnished with a complete set of balance sheets, income statements, and statements of changes in financial company?
Just as an individual, I do not understand why this is a concern. I would certainly like to, so that everyone understands.
Over on my right.
In your presentation, you spoke of providing the cheapest oil in the East. In the publication addressed to the people of Durham by Olympic Refineries of February 25th, it too talks about lower costs to the state of New Hampshire. Incidentally, it mentions one figure of $31,000 per day, which I calculate out to be 4 cents per day per capita, or $15 a year per person. I'm wondering if you can be more explicit as to how cheap is cheapest, and does that imply that it will be less than the market price of other oil companies? In other words, would you quantify that statement of the cheapest oil in the East in terms of its real magnitude?
No, it would not be cheaper than the other oil sold in the area, but having a very large refinery, a modern refinery in which you can be generally more efficient, and having a facility that receives very large tankers which innately handle oil at approximately 45 to 50 cents per barrel cheaper than the small tankers, which are the type that come into Portsmouth Harbor now. You have a facility which can provide oil with at a lower price. Now, I think it would be presumptuous of you and for me to say that Mr. Gratzis is going to give you, Mr. Gratzis and Mr. Onassis are going to give you all of that savings, because that's not the way business is run. But I do say this, that Mr. Onassis, the Olympic Refinery Group, will have to give it to you because the competition will see to it.
How much
and that's
per
just
gallon?
like all other businesses.
How much per gallon is your estimate of gas or home fuel oil when you say the cheapest in the East?
Morning. In the morning. I know that for him. We deplore this kind of.
Some mistakes in the model. You're going to find a lot of mistakes in the reports. We simply cannot get everything exactly right. I'm sure you can take the reports. You can take the reports, you can take the model and pick it to death.
Durham. I live on the Durham Point Road. As a matter of fact, my house is the first one on the Durham Point Road, and all your 2,500 workers have got to go by there every morning to go down to build your refinery. But my question is this. On page 4 of the report that you've sent to us as residents of the town of Durham, you make 2 references to the preferential treatment that the people of New Hampshire are going to receive with fuel oil and the better prices. Just yesterday, your lobbyist in the legislature...
Neither person can be sure of what they will be and cannot perform.
Left microphone, please.
Okay, question first for Mr. Green and then for Captain Meyer. What will be the flag of registry of the vessels that will be bringing the crude oil?
There are no very large crude carriers. There are no tankers of 150,000 deadweight tons in the registry of the U.S. On the basis of that, I would presume that these ships also would be in the registry of some...
John Miller. Over the past few months, you've covered a lot of ground in more ways than one. There is one piece of ground you have apparently not covered. One very basic and important question that has not been answered. One which you may not be able to answer now and may never want to. Certainly there was no hint of the question or answer in the material you sent to the residents of Durham this past week. It would be helpful if you would make comment on this question at this time. The refinery and associated terminal is in no way a superficial project. It is one of immense complexity and potential impact. Likewise, the answer to this question cannot be a superficial one, and quite rightly so. The answer would have to be, in fact, in the form of a report, and a rather voluminous one. At that. It would list alternate sites in New England for the sites. And you've gone into some detail on how the interest...
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Report. I'll take one question.
I was hoping I'd get some comments.
You wish a comment? You wish to comment, Mr. Green?
Well, you said that it would require a large report, and I thought it might be best not... we have not compared sites in other states at the time that we made this or subsequent. As you know, we did go down and look at a site in Rhode Island for a refinery.
You would agree, then, that this decision is of an arbitrary nature?
Well, I would agree that it was not made from a regional standpoint. It was, we came...
The fact that it was selected after a helicopter flight over New Hampshire, I'd say was of an arbitrary nature.
I'll take one more question from the center microphone, and then I want to pose one that's been written and passed to me. Francis?
I have a question for you. I don't see any representative of the Olympic company, by whatever name it is, on the platform. I do not see the name of anybody representing that company in the list of speakers either for today or on Sunday. I think it's unfair to ask these other men some of the questions that have already been asked and should be asked directly of representatives of the company. And there may be other questions, and I would hope that a representative of Olympic would at least turn up on Sunday, if not this evening.
Thank you. I noted when I came in the hall early that Mr. Boris was here. I have not seen him since. I don't know whether he's here now. Mr. Papanikolaou was also here, who is a direct representative of Olympic Oil.
Well, I have at least
I will follow up your suggestion and suggest that some representative of the company be here Sunday to answer the kind of questions you want.
I have at least one question I want to ask directly of somebody who is directly involved in Olympic. And as I say, I don't think it's fair to ask these men who are experts in their own fields, but are not supposed to know who runs Olympic Oil necessarily. They just know where the money comes from.
Right. I think it's proper, and I will attempt to get your information to the people of Olympic and have them here.
Of Olympic, a question was asked earlier about who the officers and the directors of the corporation are. I believe that Mr. Green has that list. Bob, would you read that off?
You might introduce yourself, Nick.
I'm Nicholas Papanikolaou. I'm the vice president of the company.
The president of Olympic is Mr. Grotzis. I think that's no surprise. The secretary is Mr. T.R. Lincoln. The clerk is David Hamblett. And the
Perhaps now that Mr. Papanikolaou is here, you would like to ask your question.
I would like to ask my question. Mike hearing or was mentioned at a hearing in Concord, you remember, that any application for a refinery should be accompanied by a full disclosure of those who own the applying organization. Representatives of Olympic said they were unwilling to have that in the bill. I hope it's still willing to comply with that request.
Sir, in reply to your answer, Olympic is not unwilling to provide that kind of answer. As soon as we have the letter, we are going to make it public.
Thank you very much.
With the smaller number of ships that would be berthed at the Olympic terminal, we would equal those figures. With 450 gallons would be spilled at the Olympic terminal based on the Bantry Bay record.
Thank you, Mr. Harlow. Those questions were for Mr. Chase, the Selectmen's Table, and Mr. Egerton. Does that answer your question, Mr. Egerton, Mr. Chase? Fine.
Not entirely. Could I ask Mr. Harlow some more questions on that?
Right.
Different of form. And since 1971, there have been some
shoals as the focal points for the adventure in New Hampshire made many unsubstantiated assumptions about the seacoast region. Let me list some reasons why your choice spells disaster to this area. First, it's well known by fishermen and others intimately familiar with the sea that the Isle of Shoals provide no shelter from the fury of the North Atlantic. The shallowness of the waters around the shoals and many hidden ledges would be treacherous to large vessels with limited maneuverability. The magnitude and direction of the currents near the Isles of Shoals have been thoroughly researched by Loader and Chevenel as documented in their report of December 1973. They clearly show that oil spills will be carried toward the coast from Rye to Cape Ann, Massachusetts. Our present principal industries are tourism and fishing. They bring $70 million annually to this area. Any oil spills will adversely affect these vital industries. There is already a grave freshwater problem existing here. Without any further industrialization, we are now consuming the water projected for use in 1980. These are but a few of our concerns regarding your site selection. However,
All I can say is that Olympic Refineries is a private company. It came into the state trying to do business. It is still trying to do business. I think active involvement in the politics of the state, we have no intention of doing so. It is a question for the people of the state to decide.
Thank you, Mr. Papanikolaou. Send a microphone, please.
Yes, my name is Mr. Clark from Durham, and one of my two questions has just been asked and answered, I'm afraid, not very satisfactorily. The second question is this, a rather fundamental issue, it seems to me, which has not been addressed in all of the material that we've received or in any of the presentations here tonight, is some kind of rationale from Mr. Green or from the Olympian, I can't remember his name, I'm sorry, for building a new refinery designed explicitly to process imported Arabian oil at precisely the time that official government policy, at least so we're told, is aimed toward self-sufficiency in energy matters. In short, I don't understand why we're building a refinery to refine oil that the government is saying that we're not going to need anymore.
Well, the government has said that, and bless them for saying it. I think self-sufficiency is a great thing, but we're not self-sufficient in oil. There are no projections, to my knowledge, of the oil industry or of the Shah of Iran or any other entity that has studied it that indicates we will be completely self-sufficient in oil in 1985 and 1990. But let me say, even if we are self-sufficient in oil, that is the best position to be in order to buy oil from the Arabs. Right now is a very bad time to buy oil from the Arabs. Self-sufficiency doesn't mean that you're going to manufacture all of your products within your own borders. It simply means you have the capability of doing it. I would say that we have the capability of manufacturing all of our shoes. We have no problem in buying shoes, but we still import a lot of shoes because we can get them at good prices. And foreign crude oil will be at a good price if we are, in fact, in a position to produce all of our products within our own borders.
Could I follow up on that? What assurances do we have at this stage that Olympic Company will have the source of oil that they plan to refine here?
I'm sure you have. Now,
We really didn't need to be reminded of the ownership of Star Island because we have been in touch with the clerk of the Star Island Association on 2 occasions. He has been trying to keep abreast of the progress of our studies. And the situation simply is we're seeking the best location and in due course would be in touch with the association to try to
I'm sure
determine
you would
their
be, and I'm sure you have. And I still repeat what I said. Unless the island is forced, but in some manner, you are not going to have that station. And so I do not think you have done your homework. Thank you.
Send a microphone, please.
Hey, what about this? 4 or 5 consecutive turns. Is this microphone
No,
off?
no. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. I'm Representative Tony Smith from the town of Hampton, New Hampshire. A great deal of concern from people in Hampton, as well as in other places, has been expressed over the refinery. I'm a former resident of Durham, having lived here for over 25 years and brought up, as I understand, Durham into the Oyster River. Now, can your refinery actually take this output that's being dumped into the Oyster River and polluting it today and use it rather than having it go into the river?
Sir, let's stand up and take a short break. If you wish to smoke, please leave the hall to do so. And let's return in 5 minutes, please.